In the previous class we have discussed about the constructors and the object creation, okay, and even we have discussed about this, and even we have discussed about okay, how the constructors work, okay, and we have discussed constructor overloading, okay, and how do you define constructor overloading? How do you define constructor overloading?
If we have more than one constructor of the same name, with different arguments,
how do you define method overloading?
Two methods with same name but different signatures.
You only two?
Two or more. Same name but different signatures.
Okay. As long as the signature is changing, okay, there can be any number of methods with the same name. Okay, that is method overloading. Now, what is constructor overloading? How can you, in the same case, how can you define constructor overloading? Same? Okay. Just could you please tell it as a definition? Definition should be definition. Okay? Definition should not be explanation. What I told, as long as method signature is changing, okay, there can be any number of methods with the same name in the same class. That is method overloading. Then what is constructor overloading? How can you, if the interviewer asks you the definition of constructor overloading, what is constructor overloading? Then how you tell, how you define that?
as long as we have more than two constructors with different signatures in the same class,
Okay. See, when we define the method overloading, what we tell? Okay. As long as the signature is changing, okay, there can be any number of methods with the same name in the same class. Now, while defining constructor overloading, as long as the signature is changing, there can be any number of constructors with the same name in the same class. Is it required to tell with the same name in constructor overloading? In constructor overloading, is it required to tell with the same name in the definition? Is it required? No. Just because constructors cannot have other names. Constructors can have only class names. So, the best way of defining constructor overloading is as long as the constructor signature is changing, there can be any number of constructors in the same class. As long as the constructor signature is changing, there can be any number of constructors in the same class. That is constructor overloading. As long as the constructor signature is changing, there can be any number of constructors in the same class. Now, the rules are same for constructor overloading and method overloading. Okay? Number of arguments, data type of the arguments, and order of the arguments. The rules for overloading are same, either for methods or constructors. The number of arguments, the data type of arguments, and the order of the arguments. Now, do I need to explain those rules once again? Already we have discussed. Okay, you can refer to your notes. Okay, for the rules of method overloading. Okay, all the rules will be applied, even constructor overloading also. Okay, all those rules will be applied, even constructor overloading also. Okay, now let's consider that I have created objects to person class. Now let me come back to my hmm? Is it your application? No, it's apps basics, no? It's our thing. See here, we have application where we have two constructors in the class. Okay, in the person class we have two constructors. Okay, now what we are doing is, let me remove all the stuff. Okay, the person class will not change, it will be the same. Now, now, what is the value printed here? What is the value printed? 6. How come it will become 6? Since you have created 6 objects. As you have created 6 objects, it will be 6. But where we are incrementing the count? Where we are incrementing the count? In an augmented constructor. Did we increment the count in the augmented constructor which is taking int and string? Yes or no? See, we have two constructors. One constructor is person with no arguments and another constructor is person with arguments. Now, in which constructor I am incrementing the count? Person, no augmented constructor. Now, how many objects I have created using person augmented constructor? 2 or 6? Only 2 objects are being created, okay, using person augmented constructor. So, the count will be 2. Obviously, the output will be 2 only. How come you got 6? Only I have created 5 objects. Why did you think it is 6? So that I can clarify the answer. Okay? So, the output here will be 2 just because I am incrementing the count only in the person augmented constructor, and using the person augmented constructor, how many objects I have created? Using augmented constructors, how many objects I have created? 4. Using person augmented constructor, how many objects are created here? 2. Okay, this and this. Okay, the first 3 objects are created using augmented constructor. Okay, the first 3 objects, these 3 objects are being created using this constructor. Okay, augmented constructor. The last 2 objects are being created using the first constructor. This is an augmented constructor. Now, did I increment the count in the augmented constructor? Did I increment the count here? No. Then did I increment the count in the augmented constructor? Yes. So what could be the object count? What could be the count? The count could be the number of augmented constructors created. What is the number of augmented constructors created here? 2. So the output here, it will be 2. Just so the output here is 2. Okay. Now, is it a correct, or if let's consider like I have used the attribute count to represent the number of objects created for the person class. Let's consider that I'm using count to represent the number of objects created for the person class. Now, is it the correct count which is displayed? No. Okay. Actually, how many objects I have created? 5. I have created 5 objects, but the count is still 2. Why the count is still 2? Why the count is still 2? The count is incremented only in one constructor. Okay? If it is a perfect count, it should be incremented in all the constructors. Then only we can come to know how many objects are created for the class. Okay? See, if I increment the count only in one constructor, this is not the correct way, right? We can create object even using this constructor also. We may create the object using even the second constructor also. So, if you want to represent the total number of objects created, the count should be incremented in all the constructors. Just because we may create the object using any constructor. We may create the object using any constructor. So, if you want to represent the number of objects created for the class, we need to increment that count in every constructor. Then only we can come to know how many objects created totally for that class, irrespective of the constructor. Just because the number of objects created for the class will be irrespective of the constructors. Whatever the constructor that we use to create the object for the class, it will be the object for that class. So, what I'll do is I'll increment the count even in the augmented constructor. Now what could be the value printed?
5.
Now, what is the value of count printed here? 5? Absolutely it will be 5 just because if you come to the first 3 objects are using this constructor. In this constructor we are incrementing the count. And count is static, so you do the same copy for all the objects. And for the first three constructors, you do three. And for the next two constructors also, for the next two objects also, the last two objects also, we are incrementing the count. So, for all the objects, while creating each and every object, we are incrementing the count. How many objects are created there? 5 objects. So, the count value will be 5. So, just if you see here, the count value will be 5. Okay. Now, did you find any duplicate logic in these two constructors? Did you find any duplicate logic in these two constructors? Count plus plus is a duplicate logic. It is being written twice. It is being written in the first constructor as well as it is being written in the second constructor. In general, in software applications, this kind of duplicate logic is called as boilerplate code. Okay. In general, in software applications, it's irrespective of the technology, the kind of duplicate logic is called as boilerplate code. The duplicate logic that is written at multiple places is called as boilerplate code. To avoid the boilerplate code in the constructors, okay, to avoid the duplicate logic in the constructors, okay, let's just now count constructors is only one statement. Let's consider that we have some 10 statements in common between these constructors. Let's consider that we have some 10 statements in common between these two constructors. Then why to write the common 10 statements in all the constructors? Let's consider like I have 10 constructors. I have 10 constructors, and in each and every constructor I have 5 statements in common. The 5 lines of code is common in all the constructors. So what happens? The 5 lines of code is duplicated in 10 places. It's not correct, right? So what we need to do? We need to pick up the 5 lines of code. We need to pick up the 5 lines of code, and we need to put it some place where it can be called at all the 10 places. Understood? See, we have 5 lines of code. We have 5 lines of code which is written at 10 places. We have 5 lines of code which is written at 10 places. Is it correct to write it like that? Yes or no? It's not correct to write like that. There is a duplicate code, then it should be removed and it should be kept at some common place. Now, how you can do this? How you can achieve this? With your knowledge in Java, I have a problem like I have some 5 lines of duplicate code in 10 constructors. I have 5 lines of duplicate code in 10 constructors. Okay? Now I want to remove that 5 lines of code from all 10 constructors and I want to keep it at a common place and I want to call them. Then how I can do that? Create a method?
Create a method and we'll call the method whenever it is required.
Okay. Now we will create a method, okay, and we execute that method from all the 10 places. Am I right? That's one of the best ways. No, one of the better ways. It's not the best way, it's one of the better ways. Okay? So we create a method, let's consider like test itself, print values or increment value. In increment value method, I'll go for count plus plus and I'll call the increment value this is one of the better ways. Absolutely, this is one of the solutions, but this is not the best solution. Writing a method and calling the method from all the constructors. It's one of the best solutions, but it's one of the better solutions, but it's not the best solution. The best solution for this is, okay, yeah. Now what we are doing, we are calling the method. Let's consider like we have 10 constructors means from all the 10 constructors we should call the method, right? From all the 10 constructors we should call the method. But even better than this, what we can do is, even better than this, what we can do is, okay, we can use the third member of the class. What's the third member of the class? What is the third member of the class? Initialization block. And this is the initialization block. Initialization block is a block which is open brace and close brace. This is the initialization block of a class. And this initialization block is said to be an instance initialization block. An instance initialization block. Okay. Now, what is an instance? Okay. In general, in industry, we call objects as instances. Okay. Objects should not be called as object. Even a project manager or architect or even a vice president call it as object. But the technical representation of the object is instance. So, in the interview, rather than telling object, it could be better if you tell instance. Okay? Object and instance are one and the same. And in interviews, it could be better if you tell instance than object. Okay? Instance initialization block. Now, let us see when this instance initialization block is executed. Okay? And then you can understand. Now, what I am doing is instance initialization block. Okay, just this is what I am doing. Okay, in each and every constructor I have kept system.out.println with a specific message, and even the instance initialization block also I have kept it. Okay, now just let me try to compile and execute this. Okay, now how many constructors are there in the class? 2. How many instance installation blocks are there? 1. Okay. Now let me try to compile. It will be compiled successful, and let me execute this. Now, what's the output? Just see, observe the output. What should I? Observe the output. That's what I do. Already got it? Now, by observing this output, when do you think that initialization block is executed? When do you think that initialization block is executed? When? Before? Before all constructors? Okay. The initialization block will be executed, okay, before the constructor execution and after the object creation. Okay. First, what is the step? Object will be created. Okay. Then temporary reference will be created from the stack, and then the next step is constructor execution. But before that constructor execution, if there are any instance installation blocks, then the instance installation blocks will be executed. The instance installation block will be executed before constructor execution. Whatever the constructor that we use to create the object, the instance installation block will be executed. The instance installation block will be executed before the constructor execution. Before the constructor execution, the instance installation block is executed. And it is executed for all the constructors. It is executed for all the constructors. Whatever the constructor that we create, that we use to create object, or irrespective of the constructor that we use to create the object, okay, irrespective of the constructor that we use to create the object, the instance installation block will be executed. Okay. Now, how many constructors we are using? For 3 objects we are using person which takes int, and 2 objects we are using person which takes arguments. That means for all the constructors it is executing instance installation blocks. That means that whatever the constructor that we use, or irrespective of the constructor that we use to create the object, the instance installation block will be executed before executing the constructor. Understood? Now, can we put this count plus plus in the instance installation block? Will it work? Will it give the actual count of the number of? Will it give the actual count of the number of objects that are created? Yes? Definitely yes. Just because this instance installation block will be executed for all the object creation, for all the objects, irrespective of the constructors that we are using to create the object. For all the objects, the instance installation block will be executed. So we can directly get the number of objects that we create. Even going forward, we may add even 10 constructors. Okay? Going forward, if we add 10 constructors, now if there are 2 constructors going forward, based on the requirement, I may add 10 more constructors. If I add 10 more constructors, will it change the calculation of count? See, if I add 10 more constructors, even in that situation also, will it be sufficient to calculate the count? Yes. So that it has the extendability. Okay, it has the extendability. We need not to add the logic whenever we add a new constructor. But if we write this logic in the constructor, what we need to do? It will be a boilerplate logic, as well as whenever we create a new constructor, In that new constructor, we should write the logic. Okay, so it will become very hard to maintain. But if we write that common logic in the instance installation block, then it's very easy to maintain, as well as we are writing that logic only with one flex. Okay, these are the advantages of using, okay, instance installation block. Okay, what is the common logic in all the constructors will be written in the instance installation blocks. The common logic in all the constructors will be written in the instance installation blocks.
Then it is executed after the object creation, before the object.
After the object creation. That's what I told. After object creation, okay, first object creation will be done. The second, attributes will be loaded. The third, temporary reference will be created. And after creating the temporary reference, next this instance installation block will be executed. And then the constructor is executed. And the instance initialization blocks can be multiple. The instance initialization blocks can be multiple, and they can be anywhere in the class. It should not be like they should be before or after constructors. They can be anywhere in the class. They can be recognized. Let's consider like before declaring the attribute, I am giving instance installation block. When attributes are recognized from anywhere in the class, even attributes can be recognized. Attributes or methods or constructors can be recognized from anywhere in the class. Now let's consider like I have declared attributes at the end, but in general we won't do this. We will declare attributes only at the top, but it can be possible to declare the attributes at the end. Now, are these attributes available in the constructors? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. The attributes and methods and constructors and installation blocks. Okay. Wherever they are present, the compiler will think that they are present in the class. See, it doesn't search that. Let's consider like if I am using ID here. If I am using ID here. Okay, first it will search ID as a local variable. If it doesn't find ID as a local variable, then it will search ID as an attribute. It searches ID as an attribute means it will not search only before that constructor. It will search within the whole class. So the compilation will be done the whole class as a unit. Okay, it doesn't mean that we should have that attribute only before the constructor. Within the whole class, wherever we want, we can keep the members. And the members will be recognized, okay, wherever they are wherever they are present. The members will be recognized wherever they are present. The attributes and methods and constructors will be recognized wherever they are present in the class. Okay, it doesn't mean that we should declare them only before using them. Okay, but for local attributes, okay, we should declare the attributes before for local variables. We should declare the variables before using them. But for attributes, okay, within the class block, wherever we wish, we can declare them. For attributes, methods and constructors, wherever we wish, we can declare them. Now, how many instance installation blocks are there?
2.
How many? How many instance installation blocks are there? Two. This is the first one. Okay, and this is the second one. There are two instance installation blocks in the class. Okay, now let us see how the application behaves in this scenario. Now, how the application is behaving? Now, how we can tell in case of multiple instance installation blocks, how multiple instance installation blocks and when multiple instance installation blocks are executed? The order of? Okay. Whenever object is created? Before the constructor execution, all the instance installation blocks are executed. Okay? Whenever the object is created, before the constructor execution, all the instance installation blocks are executed in the order they exist in the class. Okay? For each and every object creation, before the constructor execution, all the instance initialization blocks are executed. When the object is created, before constructor execution, all the instance initialization blocks are executed. In the order they are placed in the class. What's the order means? In the order that they are placed in the class. Now, if I create 10 objects and if I have two instance installation blocks, now tell how many times the instance installation blocks are executed? If I have 10 objects and two instance installation blocks, then how many times the instance installation blocks is executed? 10 times each. Okay? So, for each and every object creation, all the two instance installation blocks are executed. So, total each 10, that means totally 20 times the instance installation blocks are executed. So, like it should be. For each and every instance, for each and every object creation, before executing the constructor, all the instance installation blocks are executed. Okay? Technically, it is possible to have any number of instance installation blocks, even 10 or 20 or 30. Okay? It is possible to have any number of instance installation blocks in the class. There is no restriction for instance installation blocks. Okay? We can have any number of instance installation blocks in the class. Okay? Now, let me write this instance installation block. In this memo demo class. Let me make it IB3. Now, just tell the output. Let me create very simple objects rather than creating 5 objects. Let me create only 2 objects. Let me create only 2 objects. And let me remove even this. Start of the main method, end of the main method. Then tell the output.
IIB3 will not be.
Just tell output. See one second. Just note down the output in your notes and tell the output for me. Now, to execute the main method, let's consider like I am executing Java space the class name. To execute the main method, is it required to create an object? To execute the main method, is it required to create an object? No. Some of the interviewers will be asking like, why main method should be static? Okay, why main method should be static means from the runtime, while executing at the runtime, we need not to create the object to execute the main method. If it was non-static, then we should create the object. But even without creating the object, directly we can execute the main method. So, for that reason, main method is static. Some interviewers will be asking, why main method should be static? Why it can't be non-static? Just because while executing from the command prompt or somewhere else, if it was non-static, then we should have created the object and executed the main method. But to make it more flexible, directly to be executed through the class name, we are making it static. And just now, tell the answer. What's the order of the output?
IIB2, IIB1, then person name, IIB2, IIB1, and then person one.
Person?
One.
No. Now, why this IIB3? Why do you think this will not be executed?
They are not creating object.
I'm calling the main method, right? I'm calling the main method. Now, if I'm calling the main method, will it not be executed? If I'm calling the main method, see, first control, where the control will come? The control will come to the main method of the member demo class. See, first the control will come here. Now, first if the control comes here, will it not be executed? First if the control comes to the main method of the member demo class, first where the control comes, first the control comes to the main method of the member demo class. From here itself, the objects are being created. What my question is, first if the control comes here, why it will not be executed? Because we are not creating any object for this class. And the instance installation block will be executed only when the object is created. That's why it is called as instance installation block. Okay? The instance installation blocks are executed only when the objects are created. That's why we call them as instance installation block, just because the instance is nothing but the object. That means only when the object is created for that class, only when the object is created for the class, then itself the instance installation blocks are executed. Instance installation blocks are executed only when an object is created for the class. Now, if we try to execute this some system.out.println. Sorry, this spelling mistake. Press compile, and first main start IB21 and person constructor. First main start. Obviously the execution will be started from the main and the execution will be ended with the main itself. Okay? Between main start and main end we have the two instance installation blocks of the person class executed. This will be executed first, and this will be executed next. IB2, IB1, and the person constructor. IB2, IB1, and the person constructor, and the main method. Now, let me try to create an object for member demo. Now, what is the output? Just note down the output and tell me. What's it? Start. IB. Just see 1 second. First main start. Okay. After main start, which then what we are doing after main start, executing main start, what we are doing? We are creating an object to person class. So, what are there any instance installation blocks in the person class? Are there any instance installation blocks in the person class? Yes. In the person class, we have instance installation blocks. Okay. How many instance installation blocks are there in the person class? 1 or 2? 2. This is the instance installation blocks in the person class 1, and this is 2. So, IB2, IB1, and then person constructor will be executed. This constructor will be executed, and then what I am doing again, I am creating a person object. So, for the person class, first this constructor should be executed, but before that, again IB2 and IB1 will be executed. Then again, constructor is executed. And again, what we are doing? We are creating an object for member demo class. Okay? For member demo class, it should execute the constructor. But do we have any constructor in this class? Do we have any constructor in this class? No. Now will it be compiled? Yes. Just because while compiling, the compiler will create a default constructor, which is a non-argumented constructor. So this will be executed, and before executing the default constructor which is created by the compiler, it will execute the instance installation block. See, the constructor might be created by the compiler or might be created by us. Irrespective of the constructor, for each and every object creation, all the instance installation blocks of that class are executed. Irrespective of the constructor execution, okay, when the object is created, then all the instance installation blocks of the class are executed. Now we are creating an object to member demo class, means definitely the member demo class instance installation block will be executed, whether the number of constructors are 10 or 20 or even 0.
Object creation, constructor execution goes simultaneously. But constructor execution or object creation is sequence, not simultaneous. Simultaneous means what happens? Both should go like this. Sequential means one after another. Object creation and constructor execution are they simultaneous or sequential? As object is created, then the attributes are loaded into object, and then the developer will be created to object, and then only the constructor is executed. So these steps are sequential, not simultaneous, one after another. So in that sequence, if we have instance installation block, this step will be added in the middle. Okay?
And actually, when the power cut is there at 9 or 10? 10 or 9? 10 to 11:30 or 10 to 11? I think Delhi power is being power cut is there at some 10 or based on that we can plan the class. 10 to 11 is the power cut. Okay, if 10 to 11 is the power cut, then what we do is we'll dispose at 7:30, we'll reassemble at 8:30, and we'll take from 8:30 to 10. Is it okay? We'll dispose 7:30, we'll reassemble at 8:30, and we'll take 8:30 to 10. Okay? If that is the case. Now, basically the installation blocks are of two types. One is instance installation block and the second one is static initialization block. Initialization blocks are of two types. One is instance initialization block, another one is static initialization block. Do you want me to give a break for breakfast or do you want me to continue up to 10 directly? Okay. Even I need to have breakfast. There are two types of initialization blocks. One is instance initialization block, another one is static initialization block. Okay? And the static initialization block is very simple. Just a static keyword and an initialization block. Initialization block with a static keyword is a static initialization block. If the instance installation blocks, if the installation block has a static keyword, if installation block has a static keyword, then it is called as a static initialization block. Now, when the static initialization block is executed, the static initialization block is executed whenever a class is being loaded to the memory. The static initialization block is executed
whenever the class is being loaded into the memory.
Now, for an execution, a class will be loaded only once into the memory. For an execution, a class will be loaded only once into the memory. Okay? For an execution, a class will be loaded only once into the memory. And that too, when we are executing an executable block of the class for the first time. When the class is loaded in the memory means when we are executing an executable block of the class for the first time. When we are executing the executable block of the class for the very first time. When we are executing an executable block of the class for the very first time. When we are executing the executable block of the class for the very first time. When we are executing the executable block of the class for the very first time. Now, what are the executable blocks possible in the class? What are the possible executable blocks in a class? Methods? Only methods? Constructors? Initialization blocks. That means when we execute either a method or a constructor or an initialization block of a class for a very first time. Let's consider like first I am executing method, then constructor, then initialization block, then constructor. Then the static initialization block will not be executed thrice. The static execution block will be executed only once. That too, when we are executing the executable block for the very first time. Let's select first I am calling the method. Then before calling the method itself the class will be loaded. Let's select first I am creating the object. If I am creating the object, first initialization block is executed. So before executing the instance initialization block itself, the class will be loaded. That means if we are executing any executable block for that class, if we are executing any executable block for that class, at that time itself the class will be loaded into the memory. When we are executing any of the executable blocks for the class, at that time itself the class will be loaded into the memory. Okay? So, before loading the class into the memory, first the static initialization block will be executed. Before loading the class into the memory, first or not, we can not call it as before. While loading the class into the memory, the static initialization block is executed. While loading the class into the memory, the static initialization block will be executed. Now, when the class is loaded into the memory means whenever we are executing an executable block for the very first time. See, in a class we can have 10 or 20 executable blocks. But even we have 10 or 20 executable blocks, okay, for the first executable block execution, the class will be loaded into the memory. For the first execution only, the class will be loaded into the memory. First we may execute a method, or first we may execute a constructor, or first we may execute a initialization block. That's irrespective. For the first execution, the class will be loaded into the memory. Okay? And then itself the static initialization block will be executed.
So if we access static attributes,
Definitely.
then also it will be.
The static attributes will be loaded while the class is being loaded. Static attributes will not be loaded when the object is created, no? Static attributes will be available when the class is available.
Then also the static initialization block will be executed.
Could you please come once again?
If we access the static attribute, then also the static initialization.
From where do you access the static attribute? From where you access the static attribute?
From another class, I am accessing
From another class means from where?
main method.
Okay. From main method of another class, let's consider like I have a static attribute inside person class. Okay. And I have a main method of member demo class. Now, for which class I am executing the executable statements? For which class I am executing the executable blocks? Whether I am executing the executable block for main person class or member demo class. See, you have a static attribute inside person, and that static attribute you are directly using in the member demo class, where in the main method. So, to which class you are executing the executable block? Member demo or person? See, in which class main method you are writing the code? Member demo. So, the member demo class static installation block will be executed. Am I now in this situation? Am I executing any executable block for person class? No. Now in that case, the person class static installation block will never be executed.
But the class will be loaded in the memory command.
The class will not be loaded into the memory until we are using a executable statement. Until we are using executable statement, the class will not be loaded into the memory. The class will be loaded into the memory only when we are executing a executable block using the class.
If it is not in memory, how we are accessing the
Attributes. Okay? The class, just attributes will be accessed. Okay? At the compilation time, what it will do? Just it will refer the p.i. P.i means in the dot class file. See, in the .java file, it will try to find whether p.i will be available or not. But the actual execution will be done only at the runtime, right? Okay? The actual execution will be done only at the runtime. At the runtime, it will pick up the values. Okay? So, the compilation is different and runtime is different. The compilation will refer to the dot class file only, not in the memory. So, it can pick up the values. Okay? Now, the class will be loaded into the memory if we are trying to execute the executable block. And at that time, we are going to execute the static installation block. So, now, will the static installation block of, when this static installation block of this person is executed, when it will be executed, and how the order of the output will be. Let me consider that. Now, how the order of the output will be. Before the first executable block, the static installation block will be executed. And only once. Before the first executable block, the static installation block will be executed. Now tell the answer. How the output will be.
Main start, then
Main start.
static installation block will be executed.
See, first it will come to the main start. Okay? And the main start what we are doing? We are executing a constructor. Okay? So, before executing the constructor, the initialization block should be executed. And is that the first executable block that we are executing for the class? Is the initialization block is the first block that we are executing for this class? Yes or no? Is the initialization block the first block we are executing for this class? Yes. So, before this initialization block execution, we execute the static initialization block. For the very first time, before the very first execution for the class, Before the very first execution for the class, this static initialization block is executed. So, first what I am doing? I am creating an object to person class. If I am creating an object to person class, first the person class constructor should be executed. But even before executing the person class constructor, first the instance initialization block should be executed. But even before the first execution, static initialization block should be executed. So, static initialization block is executed first, then the instance initialization block 1, then the last instance initialization block, and then the constructor. Then for second object creation, will it execute the static insertion block? No. So for the very first executable block only, the static initialization block will be executed. The static executable block or static initialization block will be executed only before the very first execution of the class. The static initialization block will be executed only for the very first execution of the class. So the output will be main start, and since we are executing a constructor before the constructor instance initialization block, so we are executing some executable statements of the class. First the static initialization block will be executed. Understood? Everybody? Now, let's consider, let me show you the difference. Let me explain this. Now, and let me go for let me have the attributes here. Now, am I using person class? Now, am I using person class? Yes. Okay. In this case, what's the output? Will it execute a static initialization block or not? Will it execute the static initialization block or not? Yes? Yes? Will it execute the static initialization block of person class or not? I want yes or no. Will it execute the static initialization block of the person class or not? No. Is an attribute an executable block? Attribute is not executable block. Constructors, initialization blocks, and methods are executable blocks. Now, the static initialization block of person class will never be executed in this case. Just because, what I told, the static initialization block will be executed only before the first executable block execution. Only before the first executable block, the static initialization block is executed. Now, are we calling any executable block of the person class? Executable block in the sense, either it can be method or it can be constructor or it can be initialization block. Are we calling either method or constructor or initialization block for person? Are we executing either a method or a constructor or an initialization block for person? No. Then how come the static initialization block is executed? See what I told? For a class, when the static initialization block is executed means before the first execution. If there is no executable block, where is the concept of execution? Execution can be possible only through three blocks. One is method, constructor, instance installation block. Okay? Then if these three are not there, if we are not executing these three, where is the concept of execution? There is no concept of execution. If there is execution means either we are calling a method, or we are calling a constructor, or we are calling a initialization block. Now, are we calling either of the three here? No, we are not calling the three. We are not calling a method, we are not calling a constructor, and we are not calling a instance installation block of the person class. If we are not doing that, then the person class static installation block is not executed here. Now, in this case, if we try to compile and execute, person is executed. I might be a mistake. Initialization is a mistake or something else. What you told is correct. Okay? The class will be loaded even when we are using the attributes of the class. Just type out the things. Type out the things that I have told now. Okay? The class will be loaded when we are using the class for the first time. It's not only for execution. Okay? When we are using the class for the first time, then the class will be loaded into the memory. Some of the previous things, when we are loading the class for the first time, then the class will be loaded into the memory. It might be for attribute or method or any other things. Whenever we are using the class for the first time, then the class will be loaded into the memory. Good point. Whenever we use the class for the first time, then the class will be loaded into the memory. And whenever the class is being loaded into the memory, then the static installation block is executed. That means whenever we use the class for the first time, then the static installation block is executed. Whenever we use the class for the first time, then the static installation block is executed. Whenever we use the class for the first time, then the static installation block is executed. So we are using the person class to get the count of the person. We are using the person class to get the count of the person. So in this case also, the static installation block will be executed. We are using the person class to get the count of the person. So the static installation block will be executed. So whenever we use the class for the first time, the class will be loaded into the memory, and then itself the static installation block will be executed. Now let me keep a static installation block even in member demo. Sorry for the confusion, just it happens sometimes. Now I have a static installation block even in the member demo. Now what is the output?
First they send it to them and we exam.
What's the output?
SIB member demo.
SIV member demo or main start?
SIB member demo.
Okay. First, the static initialization block of the member demo class will be executed. Just because first what it needs to do when we execute a Java command, Java space member demo. First, what it needs to do, it needs to find the .class file. If the .class file is found, then it will try to find the main method in the .class file. If the main method is there in the .class file, the next step is it will try to load the class into the memory. So it will load the class into the memory. After loading the class into the memory, then it will execute the main method. Then first the static installation block is executed or first the main method is executed? First the static installation block will be executed, just because static installation block will be executed while loading the class into the memory. Before execution of main method, first it should load the class into the memory. So first static installation block of the class will be executed, then only the main method will be executed. So if the interviewer asks you like, can I have any executable statements before the main method? Can I have any executable statements before the main method? Yes, we can write executable statements, and we can write those statements in the static installation block. Okay? Or in any way, can I execute any system.out.println before main method? Or if I want to execute any statement before main method, what I need to do?
Give it into the static instance.
That's right. Okay? Whatever the way that he asks, answer is the same. If you want to execute something before main, we should go for static installation block. The same question can be asked in multiple ways. Next question, like, if the interviewer asks you like, I want something which should be available in the first statement of the main. See, I want something which should be available which is in the first statement of the main. Then where I can do that? I want to prepare something and it should be available in the first statement of the main. Where I can do that? Static installation block. The question can be asked in any number of ways, but the answer is same. If you want to do something before main, definitely we should go for static installation block. Okay, like instance installation block, we can have any number of static installation blocks. Okay, like an instance installation block, even we can have any number of static installation blocks. And like instance installation block, even static installation blocks are also executed in the order that they are placed in the class. Even static installation blocks are executed in the order that they are placed in the class. And can we use attributes inside the static installation block? Can we use attributes inside the static installation block? Yes, we can use attributes as well as we can execute methods also. But they should be static. If you want to execute them from the static installation block, they should be static. Non-static attributes or non-static methods cannot be used from the static installation blocks. Non-static attributes or non-static methods cannot be used from the static installation blocks directly. The same static non-static rule. Okay, non-static attributes or non-static methods cannot be used directly in the static initialization block. Okay, understood? How the members of the class will behave? What are the different members of the class? We have attributes, we have methods, we have constructors, and we have even initialization block. In the initialization block, we have instance initialization blocks and even static initialization block. And this, up to this is the very basic of Java. Okay? If we have this, then only we can go forward to the next things. Okay? Now, the very big question is, are all of you comfortable with this? Are all of you comfortable? What is the attribute? What is the class? What is the object? What is the constructor? What is the initialization block? How we can make use of constructor? And when we should use constructor? When we use a permanent reference? Are all of you comfortable with all these things? Now, we can jump to the actual object-oriented concepts. In the next class, we'll discuss even some little bit small things are there. We'll discuss them for 15 minutes, and then we'll jump to object-oriented programming concepts. If you go for any training center environment, directly they will start from the next class. Directly tell what is the class, directly they'll tell the definition of the class, and they'll tell what is the object, and directly they'll tell what is object-oriented programming concepts. But how many days we have discussed? Almost we have discussed about 10 days. Okay? Without this concept, do you think that we can directly switch over to object-oriented programming concepts? Without knowing what is the constructor and what the constructor will do, what is the attribute and what are the different types of attributes, we can never get. And so that they take 8 months for completion of a course, and even after the 8th month, they don't know what is the attribute and what is the constructor and why a constructor is used. Really, this is a fact. And after going for interviews and after failing 20 or 30 interviews, they will come to know that, okay, this is not a subject that we need to learn, and they will start learning what is required for interviews. But why to lose 20 interviews to know what is asked in the interviews? It's not a correct thing, right? If you are a correct person, within the very first 5 interviews, you will get a job. That's what my intention is. You should not lose the opportunities just because to know what is asked in the interviews. I will be telling everything what is asked in the interviews. So, if you have learned correctly, I can assure that if you have learned correctly, and even if you show some minimum communication skills. See, even if you have learned 100%, if you are not able to express even 10%, it is a waste. So, if you learn everything, what I told, and if you can express everything, definitely no other person is better than you. They will not expect even these things from you. But if you tell something, if he is not expecting from you, definitely he will select you. Even there are some drawbacks. Even if your communication is less, even your attitude is not correct, even if you have some drawbacks, okay, he will select you just because your technical skill set is very high. So, just learn all the things that we are discussing, and everything is important. Okay? If it is not important, then not in the class. See, some people will think like, oh, OOPS concepts are important, I will discuss them. I will study only them. But I will be telling only the things that are asked in interviews, only that are important for interviews. Okay? So, all the things that I am telling is important. Nothing is unimportant. So, learn all the things, practice all the things, and in the next class at 8:30 we will be discussing object-oriented programming concepts. Okay? It's not 8:30, we'll make it 8:45. Okay? 8:45 to whenever the power goes.